From compact hatchbacks to surprisingly roomy sedans, we're about to take you on a nostalgia-fueled journey through 10 of the most affordable American cars that defined the 1980s. Number 1. 1983 AMC Spirit DL Liftback. Ever wonder what happened to American Motors Corporation? Well, the 1983 AMC Spirit DL Liftback might give us a clue. This plucky little compact car was AMC's last-ditch effort to compete with the big three automakers on a shoestring budget. And boy, did it pack a surprising punch. Under the hood, the Spirit boasted a 4.2-liter inline-six engine that could really get your heart racing. It's like AMC decided to stuff a muscle car engine into a compact body. Talk about a wolf in sheep's clothing. But here's the kicker. This pint-sized powerhouse only set you back $6,149 in 1983. That's about $18,000 in today's money. Not too shabby for a car that could turn heads and burn rubber. The Spirit wasn't just about power, though. Its design was a curious mix of old-school AMC styling and forward-thinking aerodynamics. It's like the designers were trying to straddle two worlds, the past they knew and the future they hoped for. But was this little firecracker enough to save AMC from financial trouble? Number 2. 1983 Ford Ranger Standard Trim. Remember when pickup trucks were all about size and muscle? Well, the 1983 Ford Ranger was about to change that game entirely. Ford had a brilliant idea brewing, one that would redefine what it meant to be built Ford tough in a compact package. As Japanese automakers were gaining ground with their smaller, fuel-efficient trucks, Ford decided to join the party. Enter the 1983 Ranger, a compact truck that packed a punch without breaking the bank. Under the hood, you'd find Ford's 2.0-liter Lima engine paired with a 4-speed manual transmission. It wasn't going to win any drag races, but it got the job done for light-duty work. Speaking of performance, the Ranger wasn't exactly a speed demon. It took about 14.8 seconds to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour when empty and nearly 20 seconds with a load. But hey, it wasn't trying to be a sports car. This little workhorse was all about practicality and efficiency. And practical it was. The Ranger's payload capacity was perfect for folks who needed utility without the bulk of a full-size truck. Plus, with gas prices on everyone's mind in the early 80s, its competitive fuel economy was a big selling point. Number 3. 1985 Chevy Spectrum Two-door hatch. Ever wondered what happens when American and Japanese automakers join forces? Well, buckle up for the story of the 1985 Chevy Spectrum, a car that's more worldly than you might expect. This little compact was actually a rebadged Isuzu Gemini, part of GM's clever plan to fight back against the rising tide of Japanese imports. Talk about keeping your friends close and your competitors closer. Now, under the hood, the Spectrum wasn't exactly a powerhouse. It came with a 1.5-liter four-cylinder engine that put out about 75 horsepower. Sure, that might not sound like much compared to some American muscle, but here's the kicker. This little engine could squeeze out an impressive 30 miles per gallon in the city and a whopping 40 on the highway. No wonder it caught the eye of budget-conscious drivers still feeling the sting of the early 80s fuel crisis. But wait, there's more. The Spectrum had a touch of Italian flair too. The renowned designer Giorgetto Giugiaro had a hand in its sleek look. However, things got a bit messy when GM decided to make some changes without asking him first. Giugiaro was so miffed, he denied designing the car for a whole decade after it hit the streets. Number 4. 1980 Chevy LUV Two-wheel drive. Ever heard of a truck called LUV? No, we're not talking about romance here. LUV stands for Light Utility Vehicle, and it was Chevy's answer to the compact truck craze of the early 80s. This little hauler was about to redefine what Americans expected from their pickups. The 1980 Chevy LUV was actually a collaboration between Chevrolet and Isuzu, marking Chevy's big break into the small truck market. Under the hood, you'd find a modest 1.8-liter single overhead cam engine. It wasn't exactly a powerhouse, churning out about 80 horsepower, but it was perfect for those post-oil crisis days when everyone was watching their gas gauge like a hawk. Speaking of fuel economy, the LUV was a real champ. It could squeeze out 23 miles per gallon in the city and a whopping 33 on the highway. That's pretty impressive for a truck, even by today's standards. But here's where it gets really interesting. The LUV was as bare bones as they come. We're talking no air conditioning, and get this, even the passenger side mirror was optional. Talk about no frills. Number 5. 1987 Renault Alliance two-door sedan. Remember the Renault Alliance? This little Franco-American wonder rolled onto American streets in the early 80s, turning heads and raising eyebrows. It wasn't just another car. It was a bold experiment that mixed French flair with American muscle. Imagine cruising down Main Street in a car that looked like it just stepped off a Parisian runway. The Alliance wasn't just a pretty face, though. It was born from a unique partnership between AMC and Renault, two companies looking to shake things up in the automotive world. AMC needed a boost, and Renault wanted a slice of the American pie. Together, they cooked up a car that had Americans saying, "Ooh la la," in the showrooms. When it first hit the streets, the Alliance was a hit. People couldn't get enough of its European-inspired design. It stood out like a croissant in a box of donuts, and that's exactly what many buyers were looking for. The Alliance offered something different, a taste of European sophistication without the luxury price tag. Number 6, 1980 Chevy Monza. Ever wondered what happened to those 70s holdovers as the 80s dawned? The 1980 Chevy Monza has quite a tale to tell. This little compact started life back in 1975, sharing its bones with the Vega. But by 1980, it was like that party guest who just wouldn't leave, still hanging around, but starting to look a bit out of place. Now, don't go thinking the Monza was all washed up. This scrappy little car still had some tricks up its sleeve. Under the hood, you could find anything from the humble Iron Duke 4-cylinder, chugging along with about 90 horsepower, to a surprising 305 cubic inch V8 option in California. That's right, a V8 in a compact car. It was like stuffing a muscle car engine into your grandmother's grocery getter. Speaking of groceries, the Monza was pretty easy on the wallet. In 1980, you could drive one home for around $3,700. That's about $17,000 in today's money, not too shabby for a new set of wheels. But here's the kicker. Despite being a bit long in the tooth, people were still snapping up Monzas left and right. Over 700,000 of these little guys found homes during their production run. Seems like folks in the 80s knew a good deal when they saw one. Number 7, 1980 Ford Pinto. Hold on to your steering wheels, folks. We're about to ignite a discussion about Ford's most explosive model. The Pinto might have been cheap, but its cost to Ford's reputation was astronomical. So why were people still buying it in 1980? Despite its fiery reputation, the Pinto was still rolling off assembly lines in its final year of production. Believe it or not, Ford managed to sell over 185,000 of these little firecrackers in 1980 alone. That's right, even after all the controversy, people were still lining up to get their hands on this budget-friendly ride. So, what made the Pinto so appealing? Well, for starters, it was dirt cheap. In 1980, you could drive one home for just $4,100. That's about $15,805 in today's money. Talk about a bargain. And it wasn't just a one-trick pony either. Ford offered a range of engine options, from a modest 1.6-liter 4-cylinder that pumped out 75 horsepower to a beefier 2.0-liter engine with 90 horses under the hood. Number 8, 1986 Dodge D50 two-wheel drive. Remember the Dodge D50? No? Well, you're not alone. This hidden gem from 1986 might just be the most intriguing Dodge you've never seen. While Ford was putting out fires, Dodge was quietly importing a secret weapon to compete in the compact truck market. So, what made the D50 special? For starters, it wasn't even built by Dodge. This little truck was actually a Mitsubishi in disguise, thanks to a clever partnership between the two companies. Dodge needed a compact truck to keep up with the Japanese invasion, and Mitsubishi had just the thing. Under the hood, you'd find a peppy 2.0-liter four-cylinder engine pumping out 92 horsepower. That might not sound like much, but it was plenty for zipping around town or hauling light loads. Speaking of hauling, this little workhorse could handle about 1,200 pounds in its bed. Not too shabby for a compact. Number 9, 1984, Dodge Colt E20. Ever wonder how a Japanese car ended up wearing a Dodge badge and still managed to win American hearts? The 1984 Colt E20 has quite the story to tell. This little dynamo was actually a Mitsubishi Mirage in disguise, but boy, did it pack a punch. Under the hood, the Colt E20 sported a 1.4-liter engine that churned out 64 horsepower. Now, that might not sound like much, but remember, this was the 80s, a time when gas prices had everyone watching their wallets. And watch them they did, because this little beauty could squeeze over 50 miles out of a single gallon on the highway. Talk about stretching your dollar at the pump. But here's where it gets really interesting. In 1984, Dodge introduced a new trim called the GTS Turbo. This wasn't your average economy car anymore. The turbocharged version of the engine cranked out a whopping 102 horsepower and 122 pound-feet of torque. Suddenly, this little Colt had some serious kick. Contemporary reviews raved about the Colt's performance potential. Sure, it might not have been the fastest car off the line, but it was described as a blast to drive. Imagine zipping around town in this pocket rocket, turning heads and saving money at the same time. Number 10, 1987, Chevy Chevette CS 3-door. Now, let's shift gears to a car that took cheap to a whole new level. Ever wonder what kind of ride you could get for less than the price of a used Colt? Enter the 1987 Chevy Chevette CS, a car so basic it makes the Colt look like a luxury sedan. The Chevette CS was the last hurrah for a model that had been chugging along since 1975. Imagine that, a car from the disco era still rolling off the assembly line in the age of big hair and shoulder pads. But why was this automotive dinosaur still around? Well, folks, it all comes down to one thing: cold, hard cash. In 1987, you could drive home a brand new Chevette CS for about $6,000. That's like finding a new car for $14,000 today. No wonder budget-conscious buyers were still lining up for this little penny pincher. But what did that bargain basement price get you? Let's just say the Chevette CS took no frills to a whole new level.